Oh no, please don't do this to us. Hey there, this is your bad Doodle Too Much Time as Hands. Doodle here with another video, and today I like to talk about My Adventures of Superman, episode 8. And oh my god, they are not holding any punches now. Now they are just throwing us to the lion's den and seeing if we can survive. And it's a good watch, but it's just, oh my god, it's so much. Like, immediately, as soon as you go into this episode, we get to see what happened to Clark when Brainiac took him. It looks like Brainiac is trying to go into Clark's mind with this device called the Black Mercer. Now, if that sounds familiar, that's because in the comics, that was a flower that would make you have like the best dreams possible, that it almost seems very real. And they adapted that in Justice League Unlimited, where that happened to Superman. But in this one, it doesn't seem to be a flower that gives you good dreams. It seems to just be a memory thing where it goes into your mind. That's cool that it's a reference here, but I don't necessarily like that it's just another machine to go into someone's mind. But what do you think? Because I love the references still. But why does it have to be so spooky to get into his mind, though? And what I mean that this episode is just throwing you into the lion's den is the fact that the reason why Brainiac wants Superman and why he wants to trap him in his mind is because he wants to take over his body now. And I don't know why. It just seems really freaky hearing this type of plot, because that's never usually a Brainiac plan. Usually he just wants to, collect civilizations, but I never thought of him wanting to be someone. I mean, it makes sense, trying to be the most powerful person. And hearing Brainiac's, coldness in here is like extremely spine-chilling, because of how much of a robot he is and how he doesn't care at all. Like Clark is saying he doesn't want to do it, right? And Brainiac's like, yeah, like you had a choice, but in the very robotic way, and it's so unsettling. But it's actually really interesting how Brainiac is trying to find his weakness. He's just trying to go through his memories and seeing what actually hurts him. That's an interesting way to, find someone's weakness. But as we've seen in the show, there technically isn't any, at least from what we know, besides kryptonite. But before we get into more of what's going on with Clark, we finally get to see Kara meet Lois, Jimmy, Brain, and the monkey. Still have to remember his name. And it's one of the most awkward and funniest things ever, because as soon as Kara realizes that Jimmy's there, she's immediately blushing. And I love that they're already just showing that they like each other. There's no like wishy-washy stuff. Yeah, they're kind of being a little bit like that, but they immediately show that they're already interested. They're not being like, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about you. No, they're just saying, you know what, I'm interested. And that's adorable. But on the other hand, we get to see Lois be completely stone cold to her, because what she sees is someone who kidnapped basically the love of her life, who she dumped again, by the way. And it's really funny because of how Jimmy is just being very comforting. He's saying like, come into the ship and we'll talk. But again, Lois is being like, no, we can't do that. And she's already there. But it's really cute, especially how Jimmy and Kara just look at each other. But it's really interesting because Kara is, saying that Clark is in trouble, but she's still thinking that her father, Brainiac, is good and that he's malfunctioning, which no, he's just being the way he is, just completely monstrous. And speaking of that monstrous, we see Brainiac try to test Clark more with every memory he's in. Like, showing his memory with Livewire, he gets very confused on how Clark was just able to stop her, but, also help her. And it baffles Brainiac, which is always awesome to see that villains are, confused by Clark's kindness. But while they're looking through Clark's memories, they figure out that the reason why Clark gets so strong isn't just because of his pure strength, it's because of his indomitable willpower that's probably from Earth, and that he gets all the strength because he's trying to protect Lois and Jimmy, and Brainiac finally figures out what to do. But this does get me into something that I'm really weird on, that, yeah, they're focusing on that he cares so much about Jimmy and Lois, but it doesn't even show his parents, the people that literally raised him, the reason why he's this good man that Lois and Jimmy tend to gravitate towards. So the fact that they weren't even shown at all in this episode to even show memories of him here, of his backstory with when he was a kid is really weird to me. But before we keep going with that, we get to see the gang trying to figure out a plan to save Clark. And it's really, like it works, right? Because they have the two smartest people there. And it kind of also shows again that Lois does not trust Kara, while Jimmy has literally every faith in her. And it's really cute because of the way they interact. Like what we finally, first of all, we finally get to see the spacesuits that we saw in the promotional image for this season. I still don't know why it has cat ears, really, but it looks cool. And we also get to see Kara try to reveal her feelings to Jimmy. But because of how awkward it is, it's actually kind of a funny awkward because she kind of backtracks and she loves the mission that he's on because, again, she still thinks that he is the leader of the planet, and Lois finally gets to figure that out. And I also love that how she teases Jimmy about that, which also shows their, friendship and why they are all good friends. But back with Clark, Brainiac figures out how to get in his head, even though he technically already is in his head, by hitting him in his best weak spot, his feelings. Because we've seen that this Clark has a big problem with how people perceive him. Not that this is bad character-wise for Clark. This is technically how he is when he first becomes Superman, because he doesn't feel completely complete. Because he feels like an alien. What's been going on with in this past season really makes his anxiety and his fears more warranted. Like when Jimmy basically gave the idea to Lex that on how to trash Superman, and that General Lane would say that Clark is weird, and Lois basically agrees with that. But even then, he didn't hear that she said she loved him for that. So things like that, small little things, do tend to affect him, especially at a time when Lois broke up with Clark. So all that horrible feeling is starting to get to him. But what I love here is that he's trying to power through that his emotions do not make him weak. They make him who he is. And I feel like this would have been much better if they at least showed his parents, again, the reason why he is the way he is. Because without his parents, everything we love about Superman would not exist. That is Superman's real power, that he has an indomitable willpower that can't be broken. But again, this is a younger Clark. This is a more emotional one. So it's still pushing through, because guess what? Brainiac is starting to mess up the memories, trying to make them something they're not, by trying to make it that Lois and Jimmy are saying horrible things about him, which never really happened. But because Clark is already feeling horrible about himself, these are starting to get to his head. And it feels like someone who has anxiety now, things that never happened, but are starting to go through the actual things that happened and start to feel real. And it's so sad. But while Clark is beating himself up for his memory being screwed up, his real friends are actually trying to save him. So they're trying to figure out where he is, what's going on. And it looks like Kara finds him, or at least finds Brainiac with him. And Kara finally figures out what's been going on. That, it's because of Brainiac that she destroyed Thanagar and those other planets. And it's his fault for why there's no real empire. And then the fact that he keeps diminishing her every time, just calling her disappointment. I don't think a lot of people realize that sometimes just those words can hurt so much more than actual fists, because it's internally, which I think this episode is trying to show that you can have all these powers, but if you're not emotionally strong enough, it will hurt. And it shows how Brainiac does not accept Clark's humanity, because when Kara was trying to say, "What are you doing to Clark?" Brainiac gets all pissed off and says his name is Kal-El. Like, it's like a horrible thing to hear him be called his human name, which shows how much Brainiac is so detached. I mean, he is a robot. And we see the internal struggle between Clark and Kara. While Kara is trying to fight Brainiac physically, Clark is trying to fight Brainiac mentally. And it looks like they're working. It looks like they finally are able to get out. And it looks like Clark actually gets out and, saves the day. But unfortunately, this was a lie. this was actually something that Brainiac constructed to make Clark, on at ease, make him more vulnerable by showing Clark the life he wished he had in Krypton with his family all being alive. And it looks like Brainiac wins. And he takes over Clark's body. And it looks awesome. And like one of the most anime antagonists I've ever seen. But one thing I actually find really funny is they kind of do the reverse on how the costumes work. Because when a Brainiac changes Clark's suit to whatever he feels comfortable with, it's actually just less clothing, which is a reverse of how they usually do armor in most media of, like, the woman having almost no armor while the men have literally a full body amount. But in here, it's switched. Brainiac is controlling Clark's body. He has no armor. Kara is literally covered almost everywhere. So I just find that extremely funny and actually really cool. Brainiac does look a little goofy, but cool at the same time. And it's really interesting on how he's, fighting them all. But Kara will not let this stand and is trying to stop Brainiac in Clark's body as much as she can. But he is a robot with no emotion and can't get tired. So he's using all of Clark's strength without holding back to fight her. Jimmy tries to use kryptonite, but because, again, Brainiac is piloting Clark, it doesn't affect him as much because he can just switch to another body. Jimmy has to stop because it's also hurting Kara, but that kind of gives Brainiac the edge, and so they get thrown out into space. And I like the little detail of the fact that their helmets just go back on when they are taken out, but that just means that Brainiac seems to win. But it looks like there's some hope, because it looks like Lois is going to go back into Clark's mind to fix it. Because what Brainiac did was make it seem like Clark grew up in Krypton and had his family there, and that's where he was accepted. So it actually looks like they were able to make this version of the Black Mercer the one in the comics and in the animated show. Something that puts you in a dreamlike state of the best life you can possibly live. So what I think is going to happen is that Lois is going to have to go in there, find the young Clark, and try to remind him on who he is, that he is not a menace, he is not a monster, he is a true hero, that he is a good person, and that she loves him so much and never wants to let him go ever again. And I think that would be amazing. But that was the episode. That was My Adventures Superman episode 8. And I cannot stop loving this show. I can't not recommending the show. If you have not watched this show and have been watching it through me, one, thank you. I really appreciate it. But two, please go watch it for yourself. It is a treat just watching, seeing a positive Superman come to light. Even though this episode is basically showing that the bad guy takes over his body, it's still really good that his will is what, pushes him. Even if it didn't succeed at this point in time, it is still awesome to see. But what do you think about this episode? What do you think of that they changed the Black Mercer to an actual memory thing? What do you think about the suit? Let me know in the comments down below. But if there's nothing else, this has been Dunamite. I hope everyone stays nerdy, and I hope to see everyone in the next video.